We have now said goodbye to 2020 and are well into the new year of 2021, third day. Or at least it's anticipating the third day. This is actually the second day. Everyone is hoping and praying that this year will be a better one. As I mentioned on the Solemnity of the Mother of God, Jesus is with us at all times. So although we can and do call sometimes better and even great or greater, or they were really great times, we need to recognize that Jesus is with us all the time, and all time belongs to him. Remember, we write these words on the Paschal Candle every Easter, that he's Lord. Last Easter, although at the vigil, even though nobody was here because of COVID, Jesus is Lord of 2020. And this year we'll write, this coming year we'll write, or this year I should say, we'll write Jesus is Lord of 2021. Jesus is Lord of every year. He's not just Lord of the years that are great according to our estimation. Jesus is Lord of every year, of all time, from the beginning of time till the end of time, even though in some years it's really hard. Some things just, now the pandemic. But Jesus was Lord when the swine flu hit back in 1919. 50 million people died throughout the world. Jesus was Lord of that year. So it's important that we realize he doesn't abandon us, he doesn't leave. I don't have all the answers as to why these things happen. But we can't say that because they happen, Jesus is somehow on vacation. Jesus has forgotten us. Jesus is angry with us, and therefore he's punishing us with this kind of thing. So even though it's hard to feel or sense, Jesus is in this year. He very much is so. He was in last year and he is in this year. As we launch into this new year, the scriptures of this Sunday, celebrating what I call our feast, that is the Feast of the Gentiles, being welcomed back into God's family, take us on a 5-step journey. It's 5-step. Probably most people have heard of the 12 steps, AA. This is the 5-step journey or program that will involve leading us to God and will change us forever if we're open to this. 5 steps. We are introduced by St. Matthew to the wise men who have come from the east. These were Gentiles, most likely. They could have been kings or rulers over their own peoples. Whatever the case, these wise men take us on more than a physical journey to the Messiah. They show us the steps necessary to look for Jesus, to find Jesus, to meet Jesus, to love Jesus, and to be transformed by Jesus. The first step. The first step that these men take was they looked up into the heavens. This is what the wise men, it's translated many different ways, the Magi. And one of the things they did was read the heavens. They looked into the heavens as astrologers for signs of God's will, what we would call God's will. What was God saying to them? Even though they would not perhaps have defined it or termed it as the God of Israel, the God of the Jews, who would become the God of the Jews and the Christians. But they were looking to the heavens to discern what God's will was. It was looking up not only with their minds, but with their hearts that connected them with the star, whatever this phenomena was. Many of the church fathers, the ancient Christian writers, thought this was an angel, which makes, to me, a lot more sense. Because, God can do anything that's not contrary to reason, because God is reasonable. But God could have had a star, but a star is a sun. So, God could have created a phenomena just for this sole purpose. But it makes sense that God would have used an angel, because Hebrews 1:14 teaches us they're ministering spirits. And in the Old Testament, what do you think they called the angels? Stars. It was another name for angels. The stars in the heavens many times represented the angelic spirits. So all too often we are looking down and inward, spiritually and even psychologically, emotionally, caught up in our own lives and thoughts, absorbed by what is right in front of us, and all too often it consumes us. And actually, it makes us quite fearful. So we worry about everything. We project, some people more than others. Some people don't worry about anything, and that can be a problem too. Because there's a legitimate form of being concerned or worry. It's just some people worry too much. Sometimes I worry about all sorts of scenarios in the future. If we are not careful, we can miss what God is saying to us. So the Magi look up, and we too must lift up our hearts to discern in prayer, what is God saying to us? What's he saying to me? This is step one. The second step these individuals take is that they do something with what they've seen, because we can look up to the heavens, we can lift up our hearts in prayer, sense that God is calling us to do something, and walk away. Well, they go searching, and this searching is going to take them where they don't know. They don't know. They just follow. They're willing to be led. What we do know is that the searching took them a long time, because by the time they reached the child, he's probably 2 or 3 years old. And it would be very challenging. Traveling in those days was downright dangerous, with bandits all along the way. And it was expensive. It wasn't like getting in your car, tank of gas, and driving from one country to the next, right? You got camels, you've got all sorts of animals, you got food provisions. Animals have to be fed as well as watered. So you got to know where all the oases are. Animals cared for, and then people to pay. Because it wouldn't have been just the 3 guys, right? The 3 wise men. They would have had other people with them. When it comes to our growth in the spiritual life, it is a lengthy journey. We have to be prepared for the long game. We have to be prepared to be patient, or at least know that we must grow in patience. Otherwise, we will be the opposite, impatient, and will give up. It's kind of like a person who wants to be an instantaneous great basketball player or a great pianist. It's not going to happen. Long game. It's got to be practicing day in, day out. This is a rule of life. It forges our character. It makes us the men and women God wants us to be. This is going to cost us, and at times it will be hazardous. It is not easy to confront the bandits in our own lives, the tempers we have. People get angry with practice when it doesn't go right, because they want to be perfect right now. The desires for pleasures of all sorts. The willfulness. We're willful. We're stubborn. We're willful. It shows itself in countless ways. The pull within us for an easy life without sacrifice. Any one of these is quite capable of making us stop the journey. With the Magi, we need to keep going. That's step 2. The third step that these men take is they show a willingness to enter into unfriendly territory, kind of the same as dovetailing with step 2, in order to find out where the King of the Jews is. They must have had courage, or to summon up the courage. These are Gentiles going into very unfriendly territory. The Gentiles and the Jews did not mix well. It was like oil and water. The Jews did not like the Gentiles, and the Gentiles, if you are not liked by somebody, you tend not to like them back yourself. Herod, they probably knew was a dangerous individual to deal with. Man murdered 3 of his own children, murdered his own wife. Anybody who he suspected was a threat to his throne, he would have them killed. So Herod was a dangerous person to deal with, but these men summoned the courage to go into Jerusalem and ask their questions. When we are searching for Jesus, we will need to summon up the courage to overcome the obstacles in our own life that can prevent us from continuing in our relationship with God, with Jesus. Sometimes that means summoning the courage to go to confession. It can be a fearful thing we all know what this is like as Catholics. It can be, might as well ask me to climb Mount Everest. I'd rather do that than go to confession, right? But we need to summon the courage and pray, ask Jesus to help us be courageous in order to overcome these things. It could be that we feel nothing is happening in our relationship with God and we need the courage to keep going, or a seeming inability to tear ourselves away from the screens. Screens are not all bad, but we can spend inordinate times on them. or an addiction we cannot break away from or think we can't break away from it. We don't have the courage. Courage is the grace the Holy Spirit gives us to overcome obstacles, within and without ourselves. Or being distracted by the various means of communication. We need to, like the Magi, summon the courage and ask the Lord for the grace to be courageous. Lord, help me to be courageous. And it could mean even just meeting this person that I'm worried about because maybe they'll disagree with me. Or summoning the courage because I'm worried or concerned about what people are going to think about me, what I'm going to look like, and so on. Every one of us needs a hopeful courage with God's help to overcome all sorts of things, laziness, procrastination. Pope Benedict XVI taught us that we're not made for an easy life, but for greatness. And nobody achieves greatness in life without some form or some courage. They need to be courageous. Step 3. The fourth step these men take as they continue on their journey is what occurs when they find the Christ child. The gospel says they worshiped him. The Greek word used by St. Matthew conveys that they worshiped this child not like Caesar demanded to be worshiped, but as the Jews worshiped God, because the word that Matthew uses is proskuneo. And this word is used it means to actually worship, so they literally prostrated themselves before the child. It would have been something of an awe-inspiring sight. It's when Satan actually says to Jesus to tempt him, all you have to do is fall down and proskuneo me. Jesus says, "Begone, Satan, for you shall worship the Lord God, and serve him alone. You shall proskuneo only God." Matthew uses that same word here, proskuneo. This is before that, of course, when Jesus is an infant. So the word is very clear as to what it means. They understand by the gift of faith they've encountered. Maybe they don't understand the Trinity, but this is God. This is a divine person. The fourth step. So they respond to truth is what in the way that it needs to be responded to. That's the fourth step. The fifth step they take is then they proceed to give the best of what they have: gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Do you and I give God the best we have? All too often we give God either a little bit of ourselves or what is left over after we have had our time and our fun doing what we want to do. So people will use their entire day for themselves with little or no reference to God, and then perhaps they'll throw him a quick prayer, almost like a leftover bone at the supper table. Is this the way we treat God? The God who has given us life and who has rescued us from sin and desires us to be in heaven for all eternity. St. Josemaria Escriva used to say of St. Joseph, he used to really dislike, and I agree with him on this, although the pictures that show St. Joseph as an old man with Mary, they're nice, but there's something off about them. This was like a medieval thing, because the idea in these pictures was that Joseph had to be old and basically dried up. Get my meaning? In order to be in the presence of so beautiful a woman. Our Lady would have been she was perfect. She would have been absolutely beautiful. So the idea was that only dried up old age is able to protect beauty. And Josemaria Escriva, St. Josemaria, really was against this idea, and so am I. Joseph would have been a young virile man who gave all of himself to God. This is the point here. He gave all of himself to God. He agreed with Mary to marry her, knowing she was fully consecrated to God in a life of virginity. And he would have been a young virile man who gave himself completely to the Lord. And that's what the Lord asks even of a young man that he calls to be a priest. Or a woman that he calls perhaps to be a nun. Or even if he calls people to be to the married state, he asks for everything. Not just 95%, get my meaning? Or 90%, he asks for everything of his children. Why? Because he gives everything. The Lord gives everything. And he even helps us with his grace to give everything. So it's not as if he asks and he doesn't help us. He actually supplies an extraordinary amount of grace that flows from the cross and the sacraments. This is so important for us to remember. There's absolutely no contradiction between the life we need to live, the rest that we need to have, and the prayer that we need to offer to the Lord. If we are going to make any progress in our relationship with God, we need to resolve to give God our best, the best of our talents, the best of our mind, the best of our heart, our purity, our soul. We need to give God the best. That is what the first commandment is all about, and God gives us the best of himself, his own Son. Step 5. The consequences of these 5 steps are that the Magi then have an angel tell them in a dream to return to their home by another way. This is a beautiful insight from Venerable Fulton J. Sheen. He probably got it from the fathers of the church. He said that once we meet Christ, like these Magi met Christ, even though he was an infant, when we really meet Christ and adore Christ and love Christ, we will never be the same. And we'll never go back the same way to the way we were, to the way we used to live. We can't, because we've been touched by the love of all loves. We will go back by another and better way. And we're frightened of this. But once we do this, we realize how stupid I was, how ignorant I was to be frightened. This is the best life possible. And yet I was so frightened. See, fear is the chief activator of our faults. That's what the saints teach us. And Satan knows this. Fear is the chief activator of our faults. And so once we give this over to Christ and really let him take it, we experience a freedom that we never knew we could have. We will be transformed by him who drew us from a far-off land and had us willingly make a journey where we had to look up out of ourselves. 2, go searching for him no matter what the cost was. 3, to summon up the courage to face whatever difficulties had to be confronted. 4, to worship and love him when we encounter him. And 5, when we encounter and worship him, we need to give him our best, not what's left over. When we have taken these 5 steps, we will never want to go back to the way we came, because we will have found out or allowed ourselves to be found by the true love of our lives. The Magi continue to teach us today that God seeks us out, but we must allow ourselves to be drawn by him and not be afraid of what it will cost us. Be willing to take the 5-step program to the life of true happiness to heaven.